Hi, welcome into Jared is Pain. This is episode 2 of A Painful Journey. Episode 1 was just a brief introduction, and so this will be kind of the first full video. In a lot of ways it feels like the most important video that I'm going to make because it's the first video to go into any sort of detail about my chronic pain, which is the whole reason why I've started this channel and started making videos, and so I feel like some pressure to get it right since this is the whole premise of why I'm doing this.
I am in incredible pain.
Life is pain, and we gotta scrape the joy out of it.
In this video, I will start with a description of my pain and where I'm at, and then I'll go back to the beginning, give a timeline overview of kind of my life up to this point, specific to pain and I guess my overall health. Keep in mind, this is the first real video where I'm getting into it. Other videos will cover more details about specific aspects. If there is anything specific you want to know more about, feel free to leave a comment. I'm going to save details about which medications and treatments I've tried until future videos, otherwise this video would just maybe get a little bit out of hand. But right off the top, I can tell you, according to my records, which didn't start until, maybe later than it should have, I have tried over 46 medications, over 15 supplements, over 32 other treatments and surgeries. It's a little bit broad. 15 plus tests, and these are different types of tests. Obviously I've had blood work, 50 times or whatever, and at least 7 different dietary plans, all directed specifically at my headaches. Really quick interruption, it's for a disclaimer. I'm not a healthcare professional, I'm not a medical expert. All of the things I talk about in the video are just my personal experiences and not meant to be interpreted as medical advice for anyone else. With that out of the way, back to the video. I'll use my age for the timeline. I could use the year. I feel like age might be a little bit more helpful. And I'm in my mid-30s, so if you really want to figure out the year, you could do the math. I was born and raised in Alberta, Canada, which is where I still live today. So most of this experience has happened here in Alberta. For anyone that doesn't know, Alberta is the second province from the west coast. So on the west coast of Canada, there's British Columbia. We're the next province in, with the Rocky Mountains separating the two. We have 2 cities that, at least by Canadian standards, are big cities, large cities. The total population of the province is, 3.8 million or something like that. Having said all that, I did live in the US for a little bit. My situation could happen to people in a variety of places. Having universal healthcare in Canada, I think, is helpful, but there's a lot of countries with healthcare similar to ours or better. So yeah, I can remember some of my earliest memories feeling pain, headaches specifically, so memories as young as 5, maybe even 4. Remember waking up in the middle of the night feeling hot and having a bad headache. At that time, my parents would have given me children's Tylenol, acetaminophen. I have 3 siblings, 1 older, 2 younger, so I'm 2 of 4. And I do recall being sick quite a bit as a child, but no more than my siblings. In fact, probably less than all 3 of my siblings. For sure, my 2 brothers spent more of their childhood and youth with infections and illnesses like that than I did. Having said that, so a lot of that was strep throat, tonsillitis, ear infections, stuff that a lot of kids in Canada dealt with. Around 8 is maybe some of my earliest memories of talking to my parents and trying to address my headaches as a larger problem than that acute headache that I was dealing with. So I remember we tried like a low sugar diet. I think some of my mom's family deal with hypoglycemia or things like that. And so, yeah, we tried a low refined sugar diet for me to see if that would help headaches. As young as like 10, maybe 9, I can remember getting really bad headaches, migraines, in fact, while spending time at a friend's house. In fact, I can remember multiple times as a child vomiting because my pain was so intense. I definitely, and this ties back into the diet thing I just mentioned, there's definitely certain things that we learned. Like, we learned if I got dehydrated, I'd get a bad headache. If I got overheated, if I didn't have enough nutrition, like if I just didn't eat regularly enough, all of those were triggers. But despite trying to manage that, there was no complete solve, or like those have never prevented me from getting headaches. They're just triggers that is a sure way to bring on a headache. Around 12, I would have started playing some contact sports. I was always an active outdoor type child, running around playing tag with neighbors, or street hockey, or climbing trees, or what have you. But 11, 12, I guess I would have started wrestling, which would be the first contact sport I started playing. I guess I played a little bit of football in there as well. And then by 13, I was regularly playing rugby. And so I only mention that because while I never had any significant head injuries that were diagnosed as significant, the reoccurring nature of contact sport head injuries certainly didn't help my situation. By like 13, I was working some summers. 15, starting high school. High school where I live is grades 10, 11, 12. And I remember, regularly taking Advil and multiple Advil because of head pain. Oftentimes, I'd take it right before a practice or right after or after a game or whatever. Try and stay on top of getting headaches, which was happening quite a bit. By 16, I was working part-time during school as well as playing sports. So, like, overall, a pretty busy person. And it was certainly high school where I at least started recognizing this as being a problem, where it would affect my social life, it would affect my sports. Yeah, I think a couple things are true. Like, I think my parents did the best that they could with the information they had, the capacity they had, and I probably needed more medical intervention earlier. I think both those things are probably true. I did have, I guess I skipped this, I did have a couple of back injuries as a child, like one as a 5 or 6 year old falling off playground equipment onto some ice on my back. By the time I was 18, graduating high school, starting university, I had my wisdom teeth removed, which I don't actually remember my headaches being especially bad during that time, but that's just part of my medical history. It's when I started university as an 18-year-old that things took a dark turn. Like something in my head broke. Something broke. So I was attending a local university in engineering, which is about as stressful and busy of a first semester, at least where I live, that you can do. And it was during a busy, stressful first semester of university that, just trying to be on from like 7 a.m. through to 10 p.m. doing homework, doing assignments, projects, studying, that the stress and pressure and capacity needed to do that just caused something to break. And it just, I definitely dealt with a lot of anxiety around that, but it was every day I had a headache, and the headache would never go away. I was never had a headache-free day. And I can describe the pain a little bit. It was definitely both sides, kind of back of my head, base of my neck, wrapping around to my temples. Since then, it's moved quite a bit to behind both eyes and temples. The specific sensations I would use to describe it vary on the headache, but often stabbing, throbbing, sometimes dull or buzzing or constant, sometimes sharp. It's difficult because some doctors and experts want to break out the headaches. It's like, this is a tension headache, this is a cluster headache, this is a migraine, and a few other types of headaches. And that's always been difficult for me because I experience a lot of all of them. So I will sometimes use headache and migraine separately. To me, migraine is just a really bad headache. But since it's become a daily part of my life, it's really difficult to differentiate when it becomes bad enough, I would call it a migraine, versus the constant headache that never goes away. So at this time, 18, I ended up kind of limping through to the end of the semester, since it happened, maybe halfway, 2/3 of the way through. Finished my courses, but then dropped out of the next semester. That's when I would have started seeing a neurologist for the first time and taking my health like a lot more serious. I mentioned that in high school that switch had already started, but by then it was like, okay, my daily life, what I'm able to do, my daily and long-term goals are all being affected by this health challenge. So I'm going to put all of my effort into trying to sort it out and deal with it. Saw multiple doctors, tried multiple things. Yeah, I really focused that maybe next 6 months on getting better and improving. It was working on breathing techniques and relaxation and getting the appropriate amount of exercise, but not overdoing it. It was watching my diet and what I was drinking and eating and trying to manage all of that in the healthiest way that I could. I would say that it improved over when I was in university, but the daily nature of the headache didn't go away. Something that I haven't mentioned yet, I grew up in a very religious home. I'm definitely not here to promote the religion that I grew up in or bash it. I'd mostly just be stating facts about my life and how it's kind of affected things, and it becomes relevant now because there's expectation in the faith that young men at 19 or older, but starting at 19, would go on a 2-year mission trip to serve the people of wherever you're traveling to, promote the church, proselyte, all of that stuff. So I was called to and served in Southern California, specifically like North San Diego and Southern Orange County were kind of the two areas. And yeah, I did a 2-year religious trip. Essentially as soon as I felt kind of well enough from the onset during university, as soon as I felt like my health was stable enough, I did this mission trip. I mentioned that there's the expectation within the church for me to do that. I definitely did it because I wanted to. Right? Like, it was definitely a conscious choice that I made and not something I was forced to do. And the mission actually started off pretty well. I would say my health problems affected it minimally initially, but about 6 months in, so I don't know, 19 and a half, it just got way worse. And I don't really know why. I don't think the stress levels like skyrocketed. It wasn't even like, it was actually in the winter. So when I arrived in Southern California, it was like one of their hottest years ever, and I was like kind of close to the desert. And it wasn't actually, when the weather was really hot, it was actually in the winter that things got a lot worse. So that led to a bunch of things. It led to me essentially being bedridden for several months. The pain was so bad that I couldn't do any of the missionary tasks that I had been doing. I wasn't really sure why it got worse. My mom had been mailing me prescriptions, getting them filled in Canada and then mailing them to me in California. The mission did have a doctor that they used, like an actual physician. So I had some appointments with him. He, deemed it beyond his skills to address directly. So then he referred me to a neurologist. So I actually was able to get, good neurology help while I was on my mission. It included, trying some new things, as well as getting an MRI for the first time, since the worry of a brain tumor was there, and actually lost my paternal grandfather to a brain tumor. So with the genetic history there was definitely concern. And tried a bunch of things. There was definitely consideration for me to just go home from my mission and get help there. I didn't really know what to do for a while, but after a few months, I started spending less time in bed because I noticed that my headache was just as bad when I would when I'd wake up than when I was falling asleep, and so just trying to sleep it off was not an effective tool. Yeah, I think I adjusted to the pain a little bit. There is a little bit of a seasonal effect with my headaches. I've noticed that when barometric pressure changes happen, that triggers headaches, and often that's associated with big temperature swings. Funny enough, where I live in Alberta, pretty bad for extreme barometric pressure and temperature changes. Southern California, not that bad. One thing that will come up maybe in a future episode of things I've considered doing that haven't is just moving somewhere that has a lower barometric pressure variation. Yeah, I mentioned I kind of slowly started adjusting and getting back to more of the mission duties. I did serve the full 2 years. I don't know if I should have. Probably not, but that's what happened. When I came home, I thought that university wasn't something I should jump into right away since it was a problem last time I tried. So while I really focused on a bunch of health treatments that I didn't do while I was on my mission, I did start working, and there's a few jobs I had to quit because they just made my headaches too bad. It was at 21 that I would have started at the pain clinic, which is something offered out of the local university hospital here. I think partially because of my age and a lot because of my religious beliefs. I was really hoping for a miracle. I was hoping that there'd be some cure, some treatment, some medication that would really turn my life around and just completely take away the trial that I was experiencing with chronic pain. I was working with a pain psychologist at the pain clinic, and he gently encouraged me to graduate from that line of thinking, that most people with chronic pain don't just have it fixed. A miracle cure is rare, and certainly I should look to address my health and look for improvements, but a miracle cure isn't realistic. But at 21, that's still where my mindset was, for sure. That's when I first would have tried Botox, which I know I'm not mentioning very many specific treatments, but that is a big one that works for a lot of people. It didn't work for me. At 22, I did decide to go back to university, this time in business rather than engineering. And I started with a part-time load, so 3 classes versus 5 being a full-time load here. At 23, I married my wife. Yeah, this will come up a lot, but meeting her and us getting married is probably the most important and best thing to happen to me in my life. Also at 23, I started attending a different headache clinic in a different city. I actually remember there being a resident or a doctor in training or something that saw me first before I saw the seasoned neurologist on staff at this headache clinic. And I remember he didn't do a good job at hiding the fact that he was excited that my case was so complex and that at 23 I'd already tried almost everything. And I'm not blaming this doctor. It was weird because when he presented to the more senior neurologist, he was giddy to hey, this one's gonna stump you, check this out, his story's crazy. And sure enough, neither of those doctors had anything that helped me. At 25, I graduated from university with a Bachelor of Commerce degree, majoring in marketing, minoring in strategic management and organization. Okay, 25, I also would have started my first career job. I started with taking the approach of not telling my boss and coworkers about my medical condition. I just didn't want to be treated differently. or have it like limit opportunities and people knowing. And throughout, my working life up to this point, I have tried different approaches with different jobs. Sometimes where I'm really transparent with a supervisor, other times I try and keep it a little bit more hush. I don't really have a specific preference. I think it just depends on who the supervisor is, who your co-workers are, maybe even the company, and definitely just the level of trust. I think generally the more trust I have with someone, the more transparent I'm comfortable being. 26, I got shingles, which a walk-in clinic doctor diagnosed as genital herpes, and then when I called and told my wife, she laughed and didn't believe me, but it was swabbed and tested to be shingles. They're both very similar viruses, but it's not a comfy thing. I would say the 26 to 28 range was maybe where I felt most comfortable in terms of my chronic pain from 18 to now, where doctors didn't really have much for me to try, but it seems like maybe it wasn't progressing to be a lot worse, and so it was kind of a period where I accepted where I was at and fairly comfortable with that, but it still impacted a variety of parts about my life. At 29, things got a little bit worse, so work got more stressful, fairly unhealthy relationship with a supervisor. That's, I guess, when I would have been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and I would have regularly started seeing a therapist for counseling, would have tried some antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications. To note, with no success in terms of antidepressants. Been with the same therapist for maybe a year and a half, and it's kind of maybe the fourth one since then. But yeah, trying to take care of my mental health has been a big part of this process, and the more that I've thought about it, the more it's just impossible to separate the mental illness from the chronic pain. It just feels like, at least for me, I'm not going to speak for everyone, impossible to deal with chronic pain for a long period of time without developing some mental illness. And I certainly have strong genetic predisposition for mental illness as well. Quite a few extended family members and even immediate family members that deal with similar mental illness as well. Something I skipped over, my headaches have landed me in emergency at a hospital several times, like 10, 20, I don't know, something, at least 10. And around 30, I just stopped going to emergency for migraines. A few reasons. One, I think the local protocol changed, and they're just like no opioids administered for that. Yeah, usually it's like they would have started an IV and started on a few meds and worked their way up to giving me morphine, and then morphine would take the edge enough that I could be discharged. Of course, in an Alberta hospital, that's like a 5 to 8 hour process, at least historically. I know wait times are even longer now. But yeah, around 30, I just stopped going to the hospital. Felt like it got to the point where it wasn't ever worth it. Where like I had a better arsenal of medications to self-administer at home, and then it's just a much more comfortable environment with, much better stimuli. There aren't, people crying or screaming. There's not the awful fluorescent lighting. There's definitely been times where I've been in a hallway at a hospital for like 12 hours and just, yeah, pretty poor conditions in terms of someone dealing with a really bad migraine episode. At age 31, I went through a bit of a career transition, ended employment with the employer I'd been at since I had graduated university, took a little bit of time off, and then did an accelerated MBA program, so a master's degree that I could do in 2 semesters instead of 4, since I already had a Bachelor of Commerce degree, and a good decision. I enjoyed that time doing school, actually more than my undergraduate degree. It was just better. Higher level material, fewer exams, more like projects and discussions around, real life business scenarios, things like that. So I felt like it was more my speed. Something else that I had failed to mention earlier, I did, apply for and receive accommodations through university, dating back to when I returned to university at 22. So I was considered a student with a disability, and that got me access to accommodations like longer periods to write exams and some things like that. Sorry, I don't know why my camera's going out of focus. I feel like I'm not moving that much. If you can't already tell from just me talking, I do have ADHD, so yeah, there's there's that in terms of complicating factors with medical stuff and health stuff. And I more mention that because just the older I get, the more I identify as someone who's not neurotypical, someone who's neurodivergent. The ADHD, I just feel like I learn different, I'm motivated differently, I concentrate differently. I'm also gifted, but then there's some areas where my intelligence scores quite a bit lower. And so along with that process of becoming a student with a disability in terms of that recognition, they had me do a bunch of cognitive assessments, and I was diagnosed with a learning disability not otherwise specified, and then actually later would be diagnosed with ADHD. So yeah, just a few of the 32, went back to university, did my MBA, and then also at 32 started a new job. That job is actually still where I'm employed today, although I'm on a extended medical leave. That job is great, and I had the best boss I'd ever had. It was the best working environment for both my skill set as well as my limitations with my disability. At 34, I developed long COVID, and I wasn't diagnosed very quickly. So when I got COVID, I'd already had a few vaccines, and my active COVID symptoms were fairly mild. By fairly, I mean I did develop tinnitus in my left ear, a constant ringing sound, and that's persisted for 2 years with no break. So that's probably the least mild part. Most of my symptoms were chest tightness and shortness of breath during the active COVID. As that became long COVID, like 4 to 6 months later, I did start to develop a bunch new symptoms. So just a lot of difficulty focusing and thinking, like reduced cognitive function. Certainly my headaches were bad, but they're always bad, so that's always a little bit difficult to measure. Kind of returning chest tightness and shortness of breath. Kind of a constant dizzy sensation, which I even feel like I've had a little bit just with the constant headaches, but certainly worse. And then my autonomic system got messed up. I eventually would get diagnosed with dysautonomia, but that factors into the, not regulated heart rate. It definitely has affected my sleep quite a bit. Yeah, as well as a bunch of stuff. And that's actually what led to me going on disability leave. And so the chronic pain has been awful and has completely affected my life, but the long COVID making everything worse was the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of needing to be off work. A few other, I guess, kind of notes from the past few years. After this leave from work, I did have about a 5-week stay in the hospital. That was not fun and not helpful, to be honest. I'll cover that in another video. It was, not a good time. Had a tonsillectomy and a partial uvulectomy, so I guess they trimmed my uvula. That has helped with breathing a little bit. It's reduced snoring at night, which is a good thing. And I did get a septoplasty where they straightened out my septum, so could breathe better through my nose. And that's been great. It's helped my headaches not at all, but being able to breathe out of both sides of your nose is always better than breathing out of one side of your nose. Yeah, that brings us up to kind of current. This entire time, from 18 to now, actively seeing doctors for my headaches, actively trying medications, trying treatments. For a lot of the time, I could say the majority, I was only ever looking to change one variable at a time. just so we knew what worked and what didn't work. But recently I've gotten so desperate that if I hear of anything, I just try it, see if it helps. If it helps long COVID symptoms or the chronic pain, either of those would be a win. And yeah, so through that course of 18, 19 years, I've tried a lot. I've spent a lot of money. I am grateful that I'm in Canada and a lot of what I do medically wise is covered. And I know that being a little bit vague in terms of treatment options, just because I didn't want to dive deep into that in this video, but pretty much if I hear about something, I try it. I've tried so many medications, lots of Eastern medicine options, lots of non-traditional medicine things, spent a lot of money traveling to seek out treatments that weren't offered locally for me. Disappointed to report that not a lot has helped me. So in terms of if you're someone dealing with chronic pain, I feel like I shouldn't be giving medical advice, but some of the things that I've heard from other people that actually have worked are newer class of injection or IV medications, so like Aimovig and the Ep2 and some of those ones that have only been around for maybe 3-4 years. For sure the Botox, and that's about it. If you've ever been on Migraine Reddit, it's a very dark place because there's a good number of people like me that have tried lots of things and nothing have worked. There's also a lot of posts that are like, I'm getting headaches or migraines and it's really bad. My doctor has prescribed this, but I'm scared to try it. And those can be discouraging to read, where I want to shout from the rooftops that if you're starting to develop chronic headaches, please do everything you can early on to try and remedy it. Once those pain pathways are really established, it's hard to get out of them, and I haven't figured out how to do that yet. I've even gone as far as looking up, researching online, who the leading doctor is in the world for migraines, and then figuring out their emailing them, and actually getting a response. So I'll tell that story in another video, but yeah, I've gone through great lengths to try and help my health. And if anyone has any great ideas, let me know. But if you're someone struggling with chronic pain, even if it's completely different from what I'm going through with the migraines, my heart goes out to you, and I hope that you get the help that you need in order to just function and live some part of the life that you want to live. I mentioned earlier I used to have this attitude that there'd be a miracle cure, and I don't have that anymore. If I could even find something that helped a little bit, it would just feel like this huge step forward as 18, 19 years in, and I feel like nothing has helped me take a big step forward. So my heart goes out to you for sure, and I hope you found something in my video useful, and I'll see you in the next one.